Hi, I'm Paul Niven, co-author of Objectives and Key Results, Driving Focus, Alignment, and Engagement with OKRs, and several other books on strategy and strategy execution. Here with my friend and colleague, Zach Ross today. Zach, hi.
Hi, Paul. My name is, like he said, my name is Zachary Ross, and I'm a technical program manager at Google, and previously I've worked at Amazon and AT&T and several startups.
Great. Well, we're going to talk a little bit of OKRs today, and in this first video, we'd like to really introduce you to the concept of OKRs. And so, first thing, if you'll indulge me, is a brief history lesson on OKRs, and this actually plays right into Zach, as you'll see in a second. But for those of you who think OKRs are a new idea, they really aren't. We can trace them back all the way to 1954, a book written by Peter Drucker called The Practice of Management. And in that book, Drucker introduced an idea called management by objectives. So every manager should state every year what they were accountable for, what they would rely on others for, and what others could depend upon them for. MBOs became remarkably popular, but as with a lot of ideas, they were not always implemented really well by big companies. A lot of companies set goals and then just forget about them. It became a very bureaucratic exercise. So eventually they fell out of favor. But they were kind of resurrected by Andy Grove when he was CEO of Intel. And he saw the latent power in this idea, but he thought, we can simplify it. It's basically two things. Where do we want to go as a company and as individuals, and how do we know we get there? And that's really the modern idea of OKRs as we know it today. And he had an intern back in those days, a young man named John Doerr, who is now a venture capitalist in Silicon Valley, who went on to fund a lot of well-known names today, including being a very early part of Google.
There you go.
And he brought the idea of OKRs, as he called them then, to Google when they were a small startup. How many people originally then, Zach?
About 10 or 12.
About 10 or 12 people. He tells a story about having a board meeting above an ice cream shop in Palo Alto where he talked originally about OKRs, and I guess Larry and Sergey, I say Larry and Sergey like I know them.
Well, they're friends.
Yeah, they're friends. Loved the idea instantly, and they used it today. From that point to today, when you're, how many people now, Zach?
70,000.
70,000. So
a little bit of growth.
Yeah, a little bit of growth there. So, but a lot of people think OKRs are just Silicon Valley. Not the case. We've had the chance to work with companies around the world in all industries, and if you have a strategy that you'd like to execute, OKRs are for you. So, history lesson over. Thanks for indulging in that. Zach, let's get to the kind of the meat and potatoes of this whole idea. How would you define objectives and key results?
Well, for us, and I think for anyone who uses OKRs, an objective really is a broad qualitative goal designed to propel an organization forward. And it's really, what do we want to do? And I think that's an important question that every business, every organization needs to ask.
Okay. And what about a key result? How
Key
do you
results.
define that?
Qualitative determination of whether you achieve the objective. So it's really being able to succinctly decide where you are along the spectrum of success against that objective.
Okay, so the big difference there, I think, is the objective is qualitative, right? So it's a broad goal that we want to pursue, whereas the key result is quantitative.
Exactly right. Exactly.
So where do we want to go? How do we know we've gotten there? Just like Andy Grove said, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I think it's so important for companies to get this right, because every company wants to set goals and achieve goals, but how do you do it, and how do you set them up such that you can be successful in doing that?
That's a good segue, Zach. So what makes for a good objective? And then we'll talk about a good key result. But let's start with what makes for a good objective.
Well, you definitely want to make it both aspirational and something with the end goal in mind. So we'll talk about this potentially later, but usually at the quarter length, 90 days, what do I want to achieve at the end of 90 days? And make it something that you actually push yourself on, and then you can, that way you're pushing the organization of some business objective that you want to achieve.
Okay, so inspirational then, right? Mm-hmm. Is an objective what you do in your job description?
Oh, no.
Okay.
This isn't your daily task list.
That's a softball right down the middle.
Yeah, that's right. Well, thank you. Thank you. No, well, it's a good question, because I think that's sometimes where organizations or teams sometimes go wrong with OKRs, where it's their daily task list, and that's not what it's meant to be. It's supposed to be inspirational for a kind of a broader length of time.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. It's something I see with people too. It's they're going to just transfer a task list to an OKR, and that's not it at all.
That's right.
But I think in working with clients, one of the issues with this idea of inspirational is I'll be working with clients and they'll be huddled around a flip chart and they'll be talking about objectives, and I'll hear them say, well, that's not inspirational enough. And, it's like, you've heard me say this before, Zach, It's like they want objectives that, will soar like an eagle and conquer all of our markets. It's not that, though, right?
That's right.
It's got to add some business value.
Well, right. I mean, we all want to work on big, broad passionate projects, but you also need to bring business value. So there is this balance between your very day-to-day activity and these really high-level goals that really anyone may want to do, be successful in business. Well, you need, what is the real business value you're adding?
Great. Okay, good. So that's an objective. What are the criteria of a good key result?
Well, measurable. And this is where I think a lot of folks do get hung up that, many times you can wrap success against an objective against something that you can measure. And because that makes it, then it's not a guessing game of whether or not you've achieved something or not.
Right.
It's have you achieved some number against some metric that you're measuring. And that is a really good way of setting, that metric for whether or not you've succeeded in your objective.
Right. Okay. So quantitative. How do we know we've achieved the objective? One of the things I talk to my clients about, though, Zach, is this law of unintended consequences, right? Because whenever you measure something, it's going to facilitate or promote some kind of behavior. And I recently read the book American Icon about Alan Mullally's turnaround at Ford, and there's a great story in there. You might recall when during the financial crisis and the CEOs of GM, Chrysler, and Ford came to Congress looking for a $50 billion bailout. And ironically, they all arrived in corporate jets.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, and that did not go over well. The congressmen were apoplectic. They were actually, they were just vicious about that. And of course, Mullally went right back and said, we're selling all of our jets. We're going to get rid of them, right? Because it's a public relations nightmare. But what happened was that in that era, like again, 2008, 2009, there was not a great market for previously enjoyed jets, right? And so they couldn't sell them.
That's right.
And planes need to be maintained, so they still had to incur expenses on maintaining the planes. He still had to fly places, and given his profile and security concerns, he couldn't fly commercial, so they had to charter jets. And ironically, the charter jet service in Dearborn, Michigan, where Ford's headquartered, was owned by Edsel Ford. So can you say conflict of interest?
Right.
So they couldn't use that. They had to bring in a charter service from out of the area. So anyway, they ended up spending a lot more money than they would have if they just kept the corporate jets.
Unintended consequence.
Unintended consequence. And so, that's a lesson we want you to think about as you develop these key results, always thinking about what behavior are they going to drive.
That's right.
That's really important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Good. And so, Zach, what about benefits from OKRs? What have you seen in your experience at Google? What can people expect if they do this really well?
Oh, I think it brings such a laser focus to an individual, a team, department, company, that if you have well-crafted OKRs, objectives and key results, it really helps that organization stay focused on the most important things. Because not only is it coming up with those objectives and key results, it's the discussion that happens during this, that what is important to us and why is it important? How do we measure whether or not we're achieving these important goals? So I think the success of your business, your organization, really can hinge many times on these decisions about setting good objectives and then how you're measuring that success.
Right. And some people might say, well, easy for you to say you work at Google, but this is the case we see with startups and government organizations, nonprofits, right? Anybody can benefit from this.
Oh, absolutely. Sure. Google, we've been blessed that we have had success, but we realize that we're not always going to be successful. Or if we want to continue our success, we have to stay laser focused on those objectives. And I think that transcends any industry, any particular type of company. So this is something that all organizations can benefit from.
Right. Thanks, Zach.
Thank you.
That's terrific. Well, that's the end of our first video here, the introduction to OKRs. If you'd like to learn more about OKRs, obviously we invite you to contact us. You can reach us at www.OKRsTraining.com. And we look forward to speaking to you again soon as we bring you more in this series of videos on OKRs. Thanks for watching.